Hi, everyone. Well, where are we? This is the typical street in the area where Dostoyevsky lived. Built, developed in the mid 19th century. You wouldn't find a lot of palaces here. Well, on the one hand, you won't find, but also many just simple residential buildings look like palaces in a way. And that's what I love about St. Petersburg. However, well, the life behind those facades wasn't the bed of flower. Well, it wasn't the bed of flowers in most cases, and it was tough, and it wasn't easy. It could be dangerous. It was dirty, and many other words. So today we're going to speak about that. Just well, at least some of the aspects of everyday life in the area where Dostoevsky lived and on the other tours, so I have shared the schedule. So on the 17th of December, I will be taking you to also the another area in this neighborhood, and that will be the series of tours where I share all this information with you, the stories, life of ordinary people as well. And obviously, I will be making parallels and connecting my narrative to some of the, plots or characters in Dostoevsky's novels. So the street is named Kolokolnaya Street. It's Kolokolnaya means the bell tower street. That's because even in this photograph, you may have noticed a church. And yes, there is a church in that street, and I will be talking more about the church in the upcoming tour. And this is the gingerbread house that I'm going to be talking about. So when I say gingerbread house, I actually mean that we locals in St. Petersburg, we often say dom пряник. Пряник means a gingerbread, well, Russian gingerbread cookie. And well, it's kind of a um, I would say when you look at this building, it's like, okay, is it a residential building? Is it a church? Is it a religious building? Is it a museum? Is it a palace? What is this? So Nikolai Nikonov, Nikolai Nikonov, Nikitich, a lot of Nicholases in his name. I bet his parents just couldn't come up with any better name but Nikolai. They could have called him Dmitry Nikonov, Dmitry Nikitich Nikonov. Nikitich is a patronymic name, which means that his father was also Nikita. So Nikolai Nikonov was originally a church architect, and he liked to build churches in this so-called old Russian style, or kind of a neo-Russian style. So the churches that he built looked like old Russian churches that would normally look, but that were normally built before even Peter the Great, before St. Petersburg, that is before the 18th century. And then he also switched to just residential buildings, and this architecture of his, these are just different buildings in the city, also looked very much like those neo-Russian Baroque-ish churches, and that's, for example, a building in Moscow. And I think here you see elements of very old Moscow, old Russian architecture, and that's was kind of the rethinking of old traditions, the rethinking, readjusting of the old architecture to the new realia. And Nikonov was very good at it. He's not the best known. He's not the one. He's not one of the most popular architects of his time, mainly because he didn't really build palaces. He didn't build unique architecture complexes. He mostly specialized after a brief period of the church construction in just residential buildings, and also because during the Soviet period, a lot of churches were torn down. Not so much actually left, and almost everything we have from Nikanov though are those residential buildings. And well, maybe this is the reason he is not really that popular, but this building is definitely a star. This is the highlight of the neighborhood, and it's just in general one of the best examples of Russian Art Nouveau. And yes, every local already has a couple of hundreds of selfies with this building, including me. And I mean, you cannot but take a couple of selfies. Whenever I was in the area, it's not anywhere where I lived, but I was in that neighborhood quite often. It's not so far from the Nevsky Avenue, which is the main avenue in the city. It's not really far from the center. Technically, it is a center now, but back in the days, at times of Dostoevsky, it was a little bit further from the center. And it was a little bit cheaper to live there. That's also the reason Dostoevsky moved to this neighborhood. But obviously now this is a very, very, I would say, okay, this is an affluent neighborhood, and the real estate in that area is, I would say, very expensive. So the church that you saw from that photo in the beginning, you saw the bell tower, and the street is named after the bell tower. It's basically a bell tower street, and the church is the Vladimir icon, the Church of Vladimir icon of the Mother of God. This is the highlight of the neighborhood. This is the main church of the neighborhood, and this church happened to be the church where Dostoevsky himself was really frequent. It was his local church. And well, I have a short video of the church which I will be sharing in one of the upcoming tours for sure. And this church, it was mentioned in a lot of Dostoevsky's novels. That's what it looked like back in the days, at times of Dostoevsky. It was of a yellow color. It was a white color, and yellow is already the color of the Soviet period. And that's what this area looked already in around at in early 1900s. It was noisy. It was busy with lots of shops, lots of people, pretty much the same vibe as it is nowadays. This is the central street of the neighborhood. That eventually this Vladimir Avenue would, and that's why the avenue is named Vladimir because of the Vladimir Church. So Vladimir Avenue eventually would take you to the Nevsky Avenue, which is the main avenue of the city. And I have done so many tours of that avenue. And this is the photo of the people coming to church, going to church. This is the gate. Before the gingerbread house was built, there used to be a very modest building there. It was an educational facility with some shops on the ground floor, and you see the photo of the kids that studied in this facility. But the building, but that plot of land was purchased, and the new landowner decided to tear down the old building and construct something more impressive and bigger, because the more apartments you have, the more money you get from the tenants. Because just like every building in this neighborhood, those used to be, well, because just like every building in this neighborhood, sorry, these buildings were all income houses or tenant houses, which means that they belong to a private entity or landowner or a company, and people could just rent apartments from these buildings. That's it. And the more beautiful the facade is, the more expensive the rent would be. So you can see that that was not a simple housing. By the way, the land was purchased by Nikonov himself, and he built this house. Well, first of all, for himself, but not to live there on his own, but for his mother. So he built this house for his mother. So one of the apartments was his mother's apartment, and the rest of the apartments he would be just he rented out, and that was the best business model because St. Petersburg was the capital, and well, land was extremely expensive. Very few people could afford owning something, purchasing something. So most people, 97% of the population of the city, they just rented apartments, rooms, depending on the budget. And that was a very good investment. So whenever there was a chance to buy something, build something, and rent it out, people did that. A lot of merchants did that. A lot of companies did that. Uh, that was the best type of investment, and The only thing what it was that 1917, the revolution put everything to an end, because all the private property would be nationalized, and unfortunately, a lot of those landowners went bankrupt and had to leave the country uh, penniless. But there's those type of things you can't really predict, right? So now let's first of all, the important thing you may have noticed that the buildings in this neighborhood, and if you have seen any of my previous tours of St. Petersburg, you may have noticed that in the central area, the buildings in the city are located one just next to another with no space between them. And this is exactly how the city has been built, and it's just the idea of Peter the Great, sorry, the founder of the city. It's called the Red Line of St. Petersburg. So obviously, if it's just one facade, well, differently looking facades, but they got one line of facades, obviously there had to be, archways and some sort of connected yards, corridors, because well, those were just the facades. The real life would be exactly behind these facades. So all these buildings would have their own archway that would take you to the backyard, and then from the backyard you could go to the next backyard. And this is how the system of connected and interconnected backyards was created. So we are in the backyard, and what is quite unusual here that normally when all these buildings were constructed, the tenant houses, normally the landowners uh, would not spare funds to make the facades of the buildings beautiful, all those decorations and maintenance. But the back side of it, but the other side of the building would normally be very plain. Like it could be just in the most cases, and we will also see that on my Dostoevsky tours. Well, the tours of the Dostoevsky neighborhood, we will see that those were just red walls or yellow walls, in most cases, yellow, and that was it. Here it's different. That's because we are talking already of the period of Art Nouveau, and Art Nouveau, unlike Classicism and other styles, one of the ideas was that the facades, the backside, and the interiors were like an integral part. And every side of the building, inside out, had to be beautiful and had to continue uh, and just connect the inside with the outside. That was the concept. That was one of the ideas of Art Nouveau. And Nikolai Nikonov followed that concept very nicely. Well, you wouldn't see this just absolutely the same decorations, but the back side of the building is quite ornate as well. This is the brickwork. So brickwork is it's cheaper. This is true, but and you see this building doesn't have any plaster decoration because in most cases it the buildings will be built from bricks, but they will also have plaster work. That's not the case because in the time when this building was finished, so early 1900s, there were already different kinds of bricks, different colors of bricks that were good enough and that were beautiful enough and I would say hard enough of a high quality just to just to be as it is. That didn't necessarily require these plaster decorations. And that's exactly the case. So on the one hand, it was these bricks were obviously more expensive than average bricks, but on the other hand, you wouldn't have to, you didn't need to, they didn't need to renew the plaster decoration every couple of years because given the humidity level, winds and snow and rain in St. Petersburg, that was that eventually would be quite costly. This tower, it's part of the building. And this was an interesting idea of the author. So, in fact, inside this tower is just a staircase, kind of the servant staircase, or back staircase, or black staircase. That's what we call it. There always would be the gala entrance, the big official entrance, and also the entrance for maids and servants. So this is not a whimsical tower. I mean, it does look like a medieval bell tower or kind of a medieval dungeon. Well, it's not a dungeon, it's just a staircase. That's it. You may have noticed also these squares under the windows, right? Well, those were the fridge. Those are little, tiny little fridges. Because in most, let's say 9 months a year, St. Petersburg is pretty cold, and 6 months a year, in especially back in the days, there was still snow on the roads. And also because it was the black ladder, well, the servants' ladder, so maids, cook maids, servants, everyone used this staircase. And also, um, it wasn't the people who lived in the apartments that did shopping. No, they never did any grocery shopping. The the servants would do that. The cook maids would do, the kitchen maids would do this, would do the shopping, would do the groceries, and they would keep the groceries in the small boxes under the windows, like under the windowsills. Well, we are going inside the staircase, and you will see that you wouldn't see any of these little boxes anymore because there was no need for them in the Soviet times. They were all eliminated, but from the outside, you can still see that. So those were little fridges because the air was cold enough to keep the food cold, just this way. And those windows, like in this section, this is the big staircase, but that was the staircase for the people who lived, for the tenants, for the guests, but never for the servants. Never. So that's just how it was, basically. And in many buildings in that area, there's also it's common to have kind of one courtyard that doesn't really take you anywhere else. That courtyard that doesn't have any connection with any other courtyard or anything. We call it a well courtyard, a well-shaped courtyard, because there's nothing there. There's no exit, and what you see is just a little bit of the sky above you and your windows overlooking the windows of your neighbors. And this is a very typical St. Petersburg scenery. And that's what I was talking about. So normally all the back sides of the buildings would look like that. Yellow paint, in many cases still not restored, shabby, worn out, and many other things. That's because nobody sees those facades, especially when it is a well-shaped courtyard. So nobody sees that. Then why would you bother? Why bother and spending money to brush it up? Makes no sense. So, and when every day, 24/7, you look through your window and you see that, and you live like that, and everything you see is the yellow walls and then a little bit of the sky, which is which gets sunny about 90 days a year on average. Well, you kind of, no wonder you get depressed. No wonder you start writing depressive, sad, uh, grumpy stories, like Dostoevsky did. Like, I mean, I can totally relate because this is very, very depressing. And especially, well, fall is a very depressing season for sure because of the constant rains. And yeah, well, you have an idea, right? So the well-shaped courtyard, that's what it looks. No exit, only one entrance, no exit at all. So it's just like that. And yes, well, that's important. So I'm going to go back just for a sec. You see this wall that has no windows at all. Yeah, that was an important thing. That's the Brandmauer. That's kind of a fire protection because most of these buildings, so yeah, they were built from bricks, right? But still, the flooring, it would be wooden. At 19th century, well, that was well, okay. Art Nouveau obviously brought a lot of innovations, including metal constructions and things like that. But still, many buildings in St. Petersburg would have the wooden floors, and that was a danger. So, because buildings were located one next to the other with no space between them or very little space. Well, is this a space like nobody, well, a cat can sneak through maybe, but not a human being. Well, but because the buildings were built so close to one another, it was decided to put kind of a fire safety wall. And so we still have a lot of it in St. Petersburg. Now we are inside that black servant staircase. And well, you saw it was like a tower. So this staircase is actually, I would say it's one of the most beautiful and one of the biggest staircases, service staircases that I have seen. And I have seen a lot of the staircases. That's an interesting thing. So Nikonov um, planned it so that it would still feel airy. It still feels like there is a lot of space, there's a lot of air, and well, by the way, this ironwork is original. You wouldn't see any ornate things, and you wouldn't see any decorations there because it didn't make sense because it was the for servants. Servants didn't need any beauty and decoration because they weren't really paying for their staying. Would be the land, would the tenants who paid for their maids living with them or coming to work for them. So it was as plain as possible, for sure. And it makes sense. But still, it it was convenient. It was comfortable because the steps are not really high and there were no elevators. Many buildings, obviously built in the 19th century, had no elevators. And this staircase didn't have an elevator. The big staircase had elevator. The black staircases never had elevators. However, those were exactly the servants, those were exactly the kitchen maids that had to carry upstairs those heavy bags with food and everything, but they couldn't care less, obviously. So this staircase was very convenient to go up when you're loaded with goods. All the wood, well, heating was still wooden. It was still just the stoves. So yeah, but at least those steps were convenient to use because they were not too high and there was space. There was some room for people. So that's I would say it's a very beautiful staircase compared to many other black staircases I have seen. Now, we're going to see, as I promised, we're going to visit several apartments in this building. Um, and we spoke about such notion as communal apartments, right? So after the revolution, private property was eliminated and everything became communal, including those buildings, tenant buildings, and all the apartments in them. And what the Bolsheviks did, well, after the revolution, the St. Petersburg, which at that point was already called Petrograd, the city had been renamed shortly before the revolution when the First World War broke out, so it became Petrograd. So Petrograd got overcrowded, got overpopulated because of the lots of people rushing to the city after the revolution, looking for work and everything. There was not enough housing in St. Petersburg. So people would be moving into these opulent apartments, you see? And apartments, which we are going to visit one communal apartment, we are going to visit one master's apartment, so to speak. Those were big apartments. They could be 10, 15 rooms easily. And in the communal times, it would be in the Soviet times, it would be one room for one family. Yeah. And there would be common kitchen, right? Communal kitchen, bathroom, and that's how it was. And there are still about 60,000 people that are living in communal housing. Still, this is a lot. This is a lot, 21st century. And people in these communal apartments share the kitchen. And this is an interesting thing. The apartment we're going to visit tonight, the only entrance to this apartment is not from the main staircase, which we haven't seen, but we will. The entrance to this communal apartment is only through this staircase, through the kitchen door. So all staircases, all black staircases, all these servant staircases would lead to kitchens, because maids, they would be coming with the groceries, they would start cooking, and the kitchen maid rooms would be also next to the kitchen and never in the center of the apartment. It was just like that. It was like that. So, and after when the perestroika, sorry, not the perestroika, when the revolution happened, so the apartments would be split. And then after the perestroika, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the apartments would also be split in different ways. So historically, it just happened so that this apartment had the entrance only through the kitchen. Let's have a look at the communal kitchen. Part of this video I filmed myself about 5 years ago, and you will see a lot of stoves because every room had their own stove. Because otherwise, how will you know how much you need to pay for your gas or for your electricity, right? Well, if everyone shares one and the same stove, so every room had their own stove. Yeah, in the kitchen, and imagine just all the different smells that were there in those kitchens. Just imagine, right? So yeah, this is the bathroom. Not in a very good condition. So I know it might be looking a little bit weird and a little bit too dirty. Well, this apartment hasn't had a renovation, right? And yet this is the old bathroom. And here in this bathroom, okay, let's just disregard the way the walls look. But we see something from the past, such as this window. It used to be just a window to the bathroom from the kitchen. Why was it needed? Because there was never really enough of light. And the kitchens and kitchen had windows obviously, but bathrooms, toilets, they never had windows. So there was not so much electricity as well, and it was expensive. So during the daytime, this was the daylight. This is the window where the daylight came from the kitchen, and you had enough light in the bathroom, and this is how you could save on electricity. And some of these buildings, not this one particular, that's the toilet we're going to talk about in a minute. This building in particular was built when there was already electricity, but it was still expensive. And that saved a lot of money during the day. The toilet. There is, just a second. One of the viewers is trying to join the tour. Very pretty late, but what can I say? Let me just send the link. Yeah, okay. So the toilet. And mind you, this is just somebody's apartment. Well, it's not a private property. Rooms are privatized, but there is still a communal space. So, and not every building, not every not everyone was able to privatize their apartments, and not everyone was able to buy out other rooms and turn it into an apartment again. So there are still some, communal apartments. The toilet itself is nothing unusual, but that urinal is historic. This is early 20th century urinal, and it was a very rare thing to have. Normally, houses didn't have urinals, only in restaurants, and in some really really posh housing you could have that. So Nikolai Nikonov tried to make his house as convenient as possible. It's not functional anymore, but this is early 20th century urinal. That's impressive. How on earth did I get to the apartment? The thing is that back in the times when I was a tour guide, I will always be a tour guide to St. Petersburg. But when I was physically in St. Petersburg, the people who lived in this house, they they knew that their house is beautiful, and a lot of people want to see what it's like inside, and they just arranged it together and decided to open doors to their apartments once a month. And this is how I visited the this house. It was like one communal apartment, one just one apartment with interiors that used to be part of the master's apartment. We're going to see it also soon. And then, well, and then it was kind of put on hold for some time, and then they reopened. So I know that now the tours are back and they are still running. Well, so my videographer was able to film one of the apartments, and I'm also sharing something I filmed from back then, 2019, something like that. So we are now in a room. That is a room in the communal apartment, and this room is a property of this family. So they changed it the way they wanted, and but they still have the original ceiling decoration. The lamp itself is not original, but the decoration is. Well, it's just some minor plaster decoration. Also, as you can see, because the the ceilings were very high. Well, the rooms were big, spacious, and well, in many apartments in the Soviet times and also in the recent times, you, typically speaking, you can just make an extra floor. You can just and you can turn it into a two-floor apartment, and it still will be enough of space for you to walk. And yeah, that's just specificity of St. Petersburg, I would say. And also, they decided to keep this wall just to make it brickwork. It gives a bit of a loft style, and I like it because these are the original bricks, and many of those bricks still have the brand name on them. Some engravings, some marks, and if I can find, mm, just hold on a second, if I can do it. Mm, Well, they were. I was trying to find the exact number of brick factories that supply to St. Petersburg. I haven't found the exact number. Well, but there were hundreds of suppliers, and in this house, so we can see the bricks coming from at least two suppliers, Yementeyev and Strelin. So those were very big brick manufacturers, and a lot of buildings in St. Petersburg were constructed with those bricks. So these are the kind of the marks, kind of hallmarks on the bricks. And there is even a museum, the Brick Museum in St. Petersburg, where just an um just just a person, a local, an enthusiast, brick enthusiast, has collected hundreds of different bricks with different hallmarks on them, and he also shares the story of houses, of the brick works themselves. That's interesting. And in this apartment, they found a secret, uh, well, some, there used to be a treasure. So a small secret compartment. And many people, when the revolution took place, so many people had to flee and they could not take their belongings with them. They couldn't take jewelry with them. They couldn't take a lot of their silverware or whatever, and they would be hiding it at home and hoping that they would come back soon and will find everything. Well, when these people moved in and when these people started doing the renovation, they didn't find anything there, so someone had found it before them. Now, this is the cutout. Well, this is not the cutouts. These are the old newspapers of early 1900s. That on these newspapers were glued the wallpapers. So just to ensure, I would say, better quality and well, just to make sure that the wallpapers don't fall off the wall, they would be glued to the wall with the newspapers. The kind of newspapers kind of enhance that adhesive qualities of the glue. Kind of. It still worked in the Soviet period too. So these people just they were able to save little bits of those newspapers. There are lots of ads of different ads. You could buy corsets, some pantyhose, and this is an interesting short article about the health of the Empress Alexandra Fedorovna. She gave birth to uh, to her daughter, third daughter, in 1899, and the entire country was worried how the Empress was feeling herself, how she was feeling. So there was a little note on how the Empress was doing after the labor, and yeah, so the all the country could find out about that. There were no Twitters, there was no television, no radio then. So that's how it was done. And I have some photos, old photos of it. Well, I just shared one with you. So that's kind of we started as well, commoners, right? So just kitchen maids and stuff. But now let's see how the rich people lived and how the tenants and their guests lived and how they would enter the building, what kind of staircase they would take and what they would see. So that was the gala entrance, right? The main entrance. And well, the door is original. It was painted. The entire building was restored, and as I said, there was no need for the plaster work, but Nikonov made sure the building would be so ornate. So he added all these tiles, and these tiles needed a good restoration in the 20th century. And right now, this building is incredibly gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous, and you just cannot pass by it and without taking a photo, taking a selfie. And also, all these tiles you can touch them. They have well, they're just incredible. An interesting thing as you see, so this is the floors, right, and the rooms that you have on the floors. Ground floor would normally be for businesses. There would normally be no apartments, but then you see second floor 9, 10, 11, then 12, 13, 15, and then apartment 77 or 14, 17, 18. How is this even possible? Well, it is very possible because well, during the imperial time, in this apartment, this house had 22 rooms, only 22 apartments. I mean, not the rooms, 22 apartments. And after the revolution, it was those rooms, what those were, those apartments was split into many rooms. So altogether, there are into many smaller apartments. Sorry, big apartments was split into smaller apartments, and there would be up to around 90 apartments altogether, and there were just 22. The house is not really big, right? And also see the ground floor. Wow, wow. Yeah, and there was elevator from the very beginning. There was an elevator. And whenever there was an elevator, it was a super expensive house. It's super expensive. Look at just, I mean, you won't see decoration on the walls, but they claim that there used to be, but it's gone. Maybe it's under the layers of that paint, but I'm not sure. So, but it is what it is. The doors are original. The wooden doors, metlach tile. Metlach tile was the most expensive one, and the well, Metlach factory. They made sure that they have enough pigment, and it went like up to 1 centimeter. Well, 80, 90 centimeters. Meters, sorry, in depth of the tile. So these tiles never wear out. Incredible. So there are a lot of Metlach tile that have survived to the day, by the way. And the elevator obviously looked different. The construction itself for the elevator was also different, obviously. The original doors. However, most apartments have the original wooden doors and the stained glass. Before the revolution, so all the glass was made was stained glass. Why? Because you weren't supposed to see the courtyard, you weren't supposed to see the black ladder. Well, I mean the black staircase, the staircase for the servants. Right now, it's only the upper section of this of these windows that has survived, unfortunately. Another interesting thing is the doorbells. Well, this is the photo I took 5 years ago. So this, yeah, but I think it was like 6 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 even years ago. I'm not sure exactly when I was there. So every doorbell is connected to a different apartment, and they're signed. Yeah. That's how it was. Obviously, the elevator is modern. It's not the historic elevator, but the doors are. So the doors are original, and the staircase is original. The ironwork is original, and also the steps. The steps are very convenient to walk up. They were lower than the average steps and very convenient to walk if you're wearing a long skirt or anything. Very, very lovely. If you may have noticed that the stained glass design is different in every window. This is the photo of the door, and in the center you see there is an interesting switch. So it's not actually a switch, but it's the bell. It's the doorbell. So you could just pull that switch, and so that switch was connected to a bell in the door with a rope, and this is how the doorbell worked. And very few apartments, well, there are about dozens of apartments that still have those doorbells, but they're not really functioning. But the mechanism itself is there. The room we are going to see has even their original doorbell. It's not functioning anymore, but the doorbell is there. All those modern doorbells, it's very confusing. It is very confusing. What can I say? Well, it is what it is. We are now on the third or the fourth floor, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I think it's like the fourth floor. And that's what the staircase looks um, the gala staircase, right? The main staircase. Some decoration. There used to be more. I'm pretty sure there used to be decorations on the walls, but they're all now gone. They're all now under the layers of Soviet paint and the modern paint. Just some photos that I would like to share with you of a good quality photographs of the stained glass. They're works of art. Again, every window has different stained glass decoration. The designs are lovely. Art Nouveau, it clearly gives you this Art Nouveau vibe. It's a pity that most of the stained glass hasn't made it, but we understand. So a lot of stained glass was lost during the siege of Leningrad, right? So the Second World War, because of the constant bombings, and that's understandable. And so the final part of the tour, so is the visit to the master's apartment. Technically speaking, we're basically going to look at this room because this is the part of the apartment that has some period furniture, not the original furniture, but the period furniture. But they have the original stove and also the original decorations. The wallpapers are modern, but you see this room looks really nicely. Everything is in key, everything is aligned, and looks really cozy to me, I would say. So, what is this apartment? Originally, so this room is part of the apartment that was designed by Nikonov for his mother, right? I told you that Nikonov built this house for himself. He owned the house. It was his own investment. And he built it. He knew that one apartment would be for his mother. So the ceiling decoration is original. This is not original. The window is original. Even the latch on the window is original. This is the original locks. You turn the switch. You turn it, and then this metal rods go up and down, closing or opening the windows. The window frame is original. I don't think that the glass itself is original, but the frames for sure. Well, it shows. I think you can easily see that. And but after after the revolution, so when all the big apartments were cut into smaller apartments, since this house wasn't an ordinary one, and but there were many people who expressed their wish to live in this house. So the big apartment that was designed for Nikonov's mother was split into three apartments. Originally, it had 13 rooms, and then it was split into three. And this section, four rooms, were given to a that's the bell, by the way. Were given to uh okay, let's just say someone from the government. Okay, we're not going into details here. So someone from the government, some of the Soviet official lived in this apartment, and obviously he didn't. It wasn't like he lived in one room. No, he had a four-room apartment because yeah, it was kind of socialism, but not socialism to everyone, not social socialism still. In the other part of the apartment lived the ballerina. That's what I was told by a lady who lives in this apartment now. She prefers to be off camera, but she does the tours herself, so she showed us around, and I was there with a small group. So, but she prefers to be off camera, and my videographer wasn't also able to. Well, it was someone else who gave a tour, so I can't really show the lady herself, but. This is the restored stove, but the original Finnish design, where we just call it kind of a Finnish stove from Finland, because well, Finland is very close to St. Petersburg. In the imperial times, it was part of the empire actually, and then it became an independent country after the revolution. So, and there are a lot of stoves in St. Petersburg that have survived till nowadays, but many of them need a good restoration. And also, you see that there is well, kind of the tiles don't really match. There's kind of a little bit gap between them. So it turned out that also some time ago, they found out during the restoration that there actually was also treasures hidden there. Well, they saw the secret compartment, but they didn't see the treasures. They must have been discovered in the Soviet times. The St. Petersburg, well, To the date, there have been found 200 hidden treasures, and there still must be some that have not been discovered yet. Must be. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure must be. Um, well, again, so both treasures had been found before. It became a kind of it, well, before it was discovered by the people who got involved in the restoration and everything. I mean, renovation, not restoration, but renovation. But well, I guess it's just part of the story. It kind of comes with the package. So the people who left these apartments after the revolution, they were hoping to come back, and they left some of their treasures, money maybe as well, and some silverware, some jewelry. Well, they must have, well, they just kept it there, hoping to come back soon. And also, when I was there, I'm not sure about now, but when I was there in 2020, yeah, 2020, 2019, I don't remember. There was also a small hotel. One of the communal apartments was turned into a hotel, and in that apartment was the stove, which was restored. And this is a lovely stove. I don't think that the colors are original, to be honest, but it looks lovely. So these are very typical stoves. Because that stove, the brown one, it was the stove in the master's apartment. That was an original and expensive stove. But most stoves would look like that. It would be just white tiles, sometimes some decoration on the top, and that was it. So yeah, this is it. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for joining me. And hi, there's something really wrong with with the lights, and I will try to work it out somehow because it's very blurry. I'll see what I can do about it. Goodness gracious. But but I hope that the video itself was of a much better quality than what you see now. Maybe I just need to wipe the camera, but I'm not sure. Wow, this is really bad. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions, and hi to all those who joined us a little after we started. Good to see you. And if you missed a lot, so this has been recorded and I will be able to share the recording later on, hopefully tonight, maybe tomorrow. So let me share with you the schedule for tonight. There are going to be two more tours. Dostoyevsky Part 2. I will be doing it together with my husband. And then the Temple Mount. More archaeology, more information is going to be last tour in this. I think it's going to be like the 10th episode. It's all about the archaeology of the Temple Mount and also around some of the most recent findings. Very, I would say, suggestive of very some interesting things that happened over the course of all these thousands of years. I thought the photos were blurry. Well, they are old. Thanks, Anna. I like seeing old times apartments. There were a couple of blurry photographs, a couple of them, but in general, they should have been okay. The video itself should have been okay. And this is not blurry. I think it's just something wrong with my camera because, yeah, it's definitely something. Maybe it's the lights. I'm not sure. Just the first ones. There were a couple of blurry photographs. This is true, but the architecture was beautiful and I had a lot of personality. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you so much. This is true. And well, we're going to see a lot more in the upcoming tours next weekend. And as I said, it's going to be a short series of talks. There are going to be several episodes, and they're going to be some even more modest buildings. They're going to be more opulent ones. We're going to explore the lobbies because lobbies. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Shin. Thank you so much. So we also will see a lot of beautiful lobbies. Some of them are really impressive and they almost look like palaces. Some less opulent, but also quite interesting to see. So it's all about those stories, behind the facades. Also, we'll be talking about some locals who lived in those streets, not just, aristocracy, but, common people like us, I would say. when the house was originally built, how many people lived there. So when it was built, again, as I said, it was early 1900s when it was built, and there were 22 apartments. So 22 people, 22 families, not the people, but 22 families lived there. Yes, and one big apartment was for the architect's mother because he could. That's how it was. In many cases, kitchen maids live with the family, but well, it was also quite okay if kitchen maids were hired. They lived elsewhere, but they would come every day to cook for the family, and then they would leave for the nighttime. It was also very common. Also, while we're still here, let me remind you that on my website, anayagai.com, you can find the schedule for the upcoming weekend. There are many tours scheduled till February already. I'm just not going to share everything here. I don't want to spam the chat too much. Also, there are links where you can support me. As you know, all my tours, unless they are private incentives, they are free to join, but they are tip supported. So you can support me either by sending a PayPal donation or buying me a coffees. Also, on my website and on my YouTube channel, you can find two recordings as of the previous weekend. And last night, well, yesterday we had a quiet walk in a lovely, cozy, and quiet neighborhood of Tbilisi, Georgia. And I'm hoping to share the recordings as of last night. And well, uh, tonight, maybe tomorrow. So you have all the information, and also there is about that library of about 900 videos, and all those videos, all those recordings, 900. This is just incredible. Around 900 are available for my sponsors. There's also a link if you would like to know more in more details about how it works. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. It's been lovely to go back to St. Petersburg, to those very untouristy, okay, less touristy areas. There's something also. What's going on? Okay, I need to reboot my computer. I need to see what's going on there, and also probably reboot my hairdo. I'm not sure what's going on. Thank you, everyone. Joanne, enjoy your travels. I will see you in 20 minutes on a
Dostoyevsky. Thank you so much. Bye bye, everyone.